to get a better understanding of all that has been happening on the global stage and the implications for businesses and the workforce in Singapore, we are honored to have with us today distinguished faculty members from NUS Business School and Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in a panel discussion on the shifting world order and its implications. Please join me in welcoming the panel comprising Emeritus Professor in the Department of Finance and Department of Strategy and Policy, NUS Business School, Professor Bernard Yeung. Lee Ka-shing, Professor in Economics from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, Professor Danny Kuah. And our moderator for today, Director of the Future Office in NUS, Dr. Adrian Kuah. And for our audience in this auditorium and online, please scan this QR code or use the bit.ly link to ask questions at any time. Dr. Kuah, over to you, please.
All right, good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning. I think the President and the Senior Minister of State have left us pretty big shoes to fill, but we will try nevertheless. So let me begin by saying a few things, and then I'll turn it over to our esteemed panelists. Read or watch the news today, and you get confronted with issues such as geopolitics and war, tariffs and trade wars, humanitarian crisis, AI and other technology disruptions, the ongoing climate crisis, and the list goes on. And one gets the sense that there are some deep and profound changes that are occurring, and that there's also a sense of no going back to the world that we are familiar with. And at the same time, these issues are not merely big picture issues happening out there to someone else. These have profound implications for all of us. As nations, as societies, and especially as individuals. They will impact on our lives and our livelihoods, our aspirations and our notions of the good life. So I'm very happy to have with me on the panel two experts to help us make sense of what's going on in the world. Professor Danny Kuah and Professor Bernard Yeung. So let me just say a few words of introduction. To my right, Danny Kuah is Lee Ka-shing Professor in Economics at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at NUS. Danny works on questions such as world order, economic growth and development, inequality and income mobility. On the far right, Bernard Yeung is Emeritus Professor at the NUS Business School. Prior to that, he was the Stephen Riyadi Distinguished Finance and Strategic Management Professor. Bernard's research interests range finance, economics, strategy, and international business, which is a roundabout way of saying that we have two very smart people on the panel to help us make sense of what's going on in the world. So what I'd like to do is to perhaps turn it over to my colleagues, and each of you perhaps give us a spiel as to what's going on, because I think the issues before us are large, complex, and sometimes we feel overwhelmed by them, and perhaps we need some framing of the issues to help us be able to appreciate them and perhaps to respond to them. So let me start with Danny. Perhaps you could give us what you think is a great way to frame this discussion that we're going to have. So Danny.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you all for sharing your morning with us. I don't know that I have a great way to frame these issues, but one thing I might begin with is to ask all of you what you think our sources for prosperity and stability in our lives are. I'll give you my guess, and I look forward to a discussion about your guesses. Calculations by economists and policymakers suggest that there are three reasons how Singapore and ASEAN can continue to ride engines of growth to generate jobs and economic prosperity. The first of these is that we continue to advance on high-tech integrated electronic devices and semiconductors. This is a huge engine of growth for us, driven by technological developments in the world, driven by the need for ever faster AI chips. This will be a very important part of our livelihoods. And when each of us considers the skilling that we need to do, this is something we need to take great advantage of. A second reason is that economy-wide, all of us in Singapore and across ASEAN are benefiting from a resurgence in demand from a post-COVID transatlantic rich economy. The United States is growing well, the European Union is keeping pace, and they will continue to demand imports that we provide. So in terms of looking for job CET courses, let's think about merchandise exports to the rich economies for at least the next few years. The third element is tourism. Chinese tourists in particular. The reopening of the Chinese economy has brought many different changes in our economic landscape. But for us in Singapore and Southeast Asia, interestingly, what the numbers show is that Chinese tourists are a huge growth factor. Let me quickly pause and remark on a feature that's common to all three of these things: AI chips and technology, resurgence in demand from rich economies in the transatlantic region, and Chinese tourism, and suggest that one large factor that will be disruptive for all three is increasing geopolitical rivalry between the West and China. Techno-nationalism will be disruptive of AI chips demand. Techno-nationalism and protectionism will be disruptive for merchandise exports from us to the rich West. Geopolitical competition will disrupt China's economy and its flow of goods and services and tourists to our part of the world. A shifting world order to geopolitical competition will be disruptive for our livelihoods. Let me say that in the long term, I believe that much more profound for our economic livelihoods will indeed be the ongoing development of AI and technology, and how our skills and workers adapt to that. But in the short term, and for the foreseeable future, a huge factor is going to be US-China rivalry and how that plays out. And I'm not talking about just the possibility of war. I'm talking about something that's already happening today. With the disruption in world order, the international trading system, the actions by the Trump administration in the United States. So if I may, I have a couple minutes left. Let me say a few words about each of these for us to reflect on how our choices need to bear on these changes. Now, there is a tendency, as we see these changes happening, to think about this as a thunderstorm that's destroyed parts of our house. And indeed, that's a good way to think about this. We can respond to a thunderstorm that's impacted our house by immediately picking up things around us and building new walls. And that's what we indeed should do to protect ourselves. But another important thing to think about is this thunderstorm a one-off? Or do we live in a part of the world where thunderstorms are going to be hitting us every 6 months? And the right strategy for us as we develop our skills in CET and elsewhere, which model of thunderstorms is the right model for us? Is this one time or is this longer term? Let me suggest to you two things to think about to sort this out, and then I'll end. Adrian. A short-term thunderstorm is the Trump administration and the new American president. He has, over the course of the last few months, totally torn up our understanding of the world. But I want to argue he is a short-term thunderstorm. He is hugely impactful for us, but we need to look beyond him. It is difficult to understand many of the policies of the Trump administration externally, but internal to the United States, he is doing what many Americans want him to do. He is a successful American president. America today is angry at the world. It is aggrieved at the rest of the world. Many Americans want from Trump not policies, but identity. I teach at a School of Public Policy, and I tell my students, look for what the policies are. This comes up short in understanding the behavior of the Trump administration. What Americans identify with Trump is that he speaks for them. When we, the rest of the world, criticize that he doesn't understand that Liberia uses as his native language English, and he praises the Liberian leader for having such good English, and we think we are critical of him, many Americans feel we are critical of them. They don't know that Liberia uses English, and so they are puzzled by why the Liberian leader is so good at English, and Trump has articulated for them their thinking. They support Trump. Trump offers not policies, but identity. Trump offers not solutions, but revenge. His Liberation Day tariffs against all of the rest of the world is not a well thought out policy. It has no justification in any economic thinking. But Americans cheer that their leader has now taken a strong stance against the rest of the world, even against Singapore, even against my friends, the penguins in Hurt Island and McDonnell Islands, who have never done anything against America, but Trump has raised tariffs against them as well. That's the short-term firestorm that we're going through. Take Trump's views on this seriously, but not literally. Let me end, if I may, Adrian, with the longer-term consideration. Trump and his administration in disrupting the world order are short-term, but they are a symptom of something deeper and longer-lived. That symptom that's changing the world is the loss of globalization and multilateralism, the rules of the international game by which small countries like ours survive in the world. Small nations will always have difficulty in economics. We don't have the strength of diversity, and we can't leverage increasing returns to scale. We survive because we trade with the rest of the world. We survive because there are rules of the game that keep to the principles of a rules-based multilateral order. The Trump administration has begun a tearing down of this, carrying forwards a program that has seriously aggrieved, carrying out a program of developments in the world in the 20th and 21st century that have seriously aggrieved the United States. We now need to figure out how to go forwards. And I hope that in the question and answer session, I have solutions that I would like to offer, but I need to know your thinking about these fundamental causes as well. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Danny, for kicking us off. You've given us ideas enough to run a full day's conference on your own. And I guess there are some things that we really want to explore. I think your question is a very important one. Is this a once-off, or is this the beginning of a deep and sustained secular change in the global system? Because if it's a once-off, then we just simply need to hunker down and hope that the world that we used to know would come back. But if this is truly a transformation and there's no going back, then what do we then need to do to respond? So thanks for sketching out some of the opportunities and also the obstacles and the challenges. Perhaps I can just turn it over to Bernard, and maybe Bernard, you could take us through and give us a historical context as to how we got here, and perhaps give us some clue as to where we're headed.
Thank you. Before I start, I would first say that thanks a lot for inviting me to the panel and speak to this very esteemed audience. It is really a great joy to listen to President Tang and the senior minister's speech. They have provided marvelous ideas and paving forward the things that we in Singapore will do together. And congratulations to SkillsFuture. You're doing a great job. I'm very excited to hear what you're working on and what you will do more. My charge is to provide a framework, a context to understand our current world. Let me begin by thinking about how in the future historians may characterize the current state of the global economy and international relations. Allow me about 6 minutes and so on to do that. Historians will say that we have shifted from an era of globalization to one of fragmentation, and transition from positive-sum thinking and cooperative behavior to zero-sum and at times even negative-sum dynamics. Globalization era since World War II has been great and has benefited many countries. Then in the past 10 years, governments of major economies made 180-degree changes of their policies. The world now has a nerve-wracking, unstable global environment just when it needs international cooperation. And Danny and Adrian, I think this environment is going to stay. Let's put this into perspective and see what happened. I would say, let me start with globalization. I would say Europeans were almost the writer of the last 500 years of world history. They were all the givers during the colonial time, which brought misery to many non-Europeans. And please allow me to brand Americans with the Europeans from here on. Europe itself was marked by frequent internal wars, leading to the very, very deadly World War II with a horrible bomb. Then, at the end, towards the end of World War II, I think they got enough. The US led the way, creating in 1945 in 1944 the IMF and the World Bank, and then UN in 45, and the GET, which is now WTO, in 47, and also started the decolonization period after the war. For the first time, from 1945 onward to roughly 2015, the world has cross-country specialization and cooperation, guided by shared multilateral rules that Danny talked about. And this marked the beginning of globalization, driven by positive-sum mindsets and constructive policies from leading powers. Well, in the era of globalization, several things happened. The US benefit. To save time, I won't say much, but we know that. The Europeans benefit. To save time, I won't say that. It's just all their wonderful restabilizing, reconstruction, redevelopment, etc., etc. And then in Asia, Japan, Korea, and then later on, China. And China benefited a lot from globalization. And what's amazing is that it took China 25 years to do what the US did, to evolve from a poor developing country to an advanced industrialized economy. Then, one more thing that out of this is technology. We must have heard of, I think NUS has given a doctoral degree to someone because, to someone in the crowds who developed the word, the fourth industrial revolution. The AI and all this thing. It was out of global cooperation and specialization that lead to a surge in technological innovation. And also the capability of managing really sprawling supply chains. It's amazing. It's a wonderful time. So what triggered the rapid shift from the positive sum mindset of globalization to the current era of zero-sum or even negative sum perspective of fragmentation. For every nation, globalization triggers changes that produce winners and losers. And economics and individuals must adapt, and with the adjustment cost borne by the losing sector. And those in the stagnant sector will often look for a scapegoat. And stagnant tech companies will refuse to admit that they are not doing well in the competition, and they seek blames onto the foreign rivals. Now, at this juncture, we benefit from globalization, but we have to face the adjustment that come out of the good things of globalization. We just heard our president, we just heard our senior minister providing great leadership. They paint a vision. They help us to adjust and produce inclusive mechanisms so that we all will adjust forward. That is constructive program. That's a wonderful program. I observed this from the Economic Strategy Committee, from the Commission of the Future, the Skill Future Initiative, and I actually studied the economic impact of the 2015 budget and all this investment. All this is a wonderful thing. This is what good government leadership should do. Unfortunately, opportunistic politicians in dominant economies, they pursue destructive policies. Yes, I know that Trump is doing what, and he's very skillful, but as Hayek famously said, it seems to be almost a law of human nature that it's easier for people to agree on a negative program, on the hatreds of an economy, on the envy of those better off, than on any positive task. Luckily, we don't do that. While politicians adopt blame narrative by starting with protectionism, then they would tell the tech companies you're losing your leading positions, you will be dependent on others, then they escalate this to national security and ideology threats, etc., etc. And it takes two hands to clap, not just the leading nations in the West. I think in the East, we had our share. To go on to this, it would take a whole semester of international relation. It would not be fun.
So.
But I need to be watchful of time. So I would say that ultimately, the blame narrative and the non-cooperative protectionist policies driven by self-serving political interests have fueled fragmentation and intensified geopolitical tension. What is it? Just Trump? Is Trump doing this, or other people doing this? I think we need to seek deeply possible explanations. Give me 2 minutes to finish this one. One possible explanation is that communication technology has transformed politics. Politicians are increasingly elected not for their platforms, but for the ability to capture soundbite moments or to use the social media measured in seconds to sway public opinion. Another factor may be that globalization fosters a zero-sum mentality among a significant segment of the population. Which segments are they? One, those in the lower end are facing stagnation and challenge in upward mobility. The second one is that those in the far end, the PhDs, they face severe competition. And Professor Stephanie Stakchiva's research showed that people in this segment are more likely to develop zero-sum mindset. And she pointed out that restoring a win-win framework is crucial for healthier public discourse and effective policy making, including international politics. The implication, it can go on, but let's not be let's don't make it too sad. I mean, the dismal economy, let's not be sad. Let's say that this thing that Danny asked is going to stay. However, this is an opportunity for us. We are in a world, and we have good leaders. And here, if you count the population of ASEAN, of the global south, the opportunities are huge. We can do our own thing. And these vast populations I just talked about are eager to have the opportunity for growth. Stay neutral. Do the best we can. Produce as much value as possible. Work with our neighbors to produce positive outlook. Just like what we heard from President, from the Senior Minister, and see what the Skill Future is doing. You're doing the right thing. This is the way forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernard. So Danny, Bernard, I think you two have contributed another day's worth of conference material, and then there's so much for us to think about. But thank you both for bringing some.
So will Danny take me into school? Some lectures?
You certainly brought the issues into sharper relief. And I'm always reminded by what a very good friend of mine, Alvin Pang, the local poet, is fond of saying, that the big picture is the small picture, and the small picture is the big picture. And indeed, we've spent quite a bit of time looking at some of the big issues in the world. And I'm looking at the questions now that are coming over on my tablet, and they really speak to the small picture, which is also important, right? What does all these things mean for me? So I think without further ado, I'll suspend my own questions, and I do have a lot, but I do really want to honor the questions that have come in. I think the first question that I would like to pose to you is, well, how do we build the skills of C-suite leaders on climate change and sustainability when it is not that priority, even as we acknowledge that it is an existential question? And if I could just add on to it, perhaps it's not just climate change, but all these other issues that we've talked about, because historically, given the economic imperative by which we operate, we have tended to expect from our C-suite leaders simply the ability to manage the bottom line, quarterly earnings, and so forth. And for a long time too, issues of climate change and geopolitics and war have been the province of experts elsewhere. And all of a sudden, C-suite leaders are thrust into this situation where they do need to understand what the hell is going on in the world in terms of geopolitics and tariffs and wars and so forth, climate change included. So perhaps we could get some thoughts on this question from the both of you. Perhaps, Danny, would you like to take a stab at this?
Thanks very much, Adrian. Thanks for that question. It is vitally important that we need to translate what's happening at this high geopolitical level to our daily practice. So let me take a stab at this. Skills on climate change. There are two different kinds of skills that we want to be concerned with. One set is management and engineering. Take as given that climate change is a reality. What is the best way to proceed on adaptation and mitigation? That's one set of skills that we need to build, and those set of skills are independent of what's happening out there. If we put our heads up, lift our heads, and we think about what's going out there, well, climate change, the climate crisis, is a global issue. No single country by itself is going to be able to repair this. What progress we have been able to make on this comes from countries collaborating with each other. The significance of the changes that we're describing is that one very important country has decided climate change is not an issue, and it will undertake actions that are no longer supportive of what all the rest of the world does. America has pulled out of the Paris Agreement on controlling CO2 emissions. America has decided that hydrocarbons continue to be a viable way to produce energy. On the other hand, we have other parts of the world that are pushing the frontiers on electric vehicles, solar panels, wind turbines. They are the frontier of creating clean energy that will keep us from burning our planet to a crisp, even as our economic prosperity continues to be supported. The choice here is that when we as engineers or as managers in our company think about the skills we need to develop for mitigating and adapting to climate change, we need to lift our head up and understand the tools that are available to us. Do we use the tools of clean energy and adapt our skills development to an assumption that those tools of clean energy will be available to us? Or do we give up and try and go our own way? So for me, we need to be thinking, we need to be in a conversation with our political leadership, with our counterparts in different countries that are like-minded and see a way forwards in adapting and mitigating climate change. Those are the kinds of skills that I think we need to develop, and a mindset that looks for cooperation and collaboration with like-minded partners in different parts of the world.
Thanks, Danny. And before we get a response from Bernard, just to take you up on this, certainly there are two aspects to this. There's in responding to climate change, the ongoing planetary crisis. There's also, of course, that suite of skills which are more technical, STEM-oriented, and those are important, engineering abilities and all that, right? And we should be at the forefront of imbuing C-suite leaders with all these technical skill sets. But I think the other point that you made is that of the mindset, right? Because as the question framed it, what if it is not the priority? Then surely it is the role of education to make what you refer to as an existential crisis a priority. Now, how do we do that?
You know, the job of business and C-suite leaders is appropriately to look at return on investment, to look at profitability. In a world that's sensible, the return on investment and the profitability of dealing in green technologies is high. That gives us the incentive to continue to develop skills in that direction. But if we don't recognize that it is a global collaboration that makes for that high return on investment, and we blindly follow how certain other parts of the world are not going in that direction, we will be making the right choices. I think as educators, we cannot be overly prescriptive. We cannot take the high road and say this is one way to go, because businesses, corporations are also responsible to their stakeholders. If I were a business owner in the United States and my president said to me, burn, baby, burn, drill, baby, drill, that's the way my stakeholders are going to want me to go. Those of us who are not in the system, where we still have a choice, we need to be in a conversation that moves us in a direction that helps save our planet.
Thanks, Danny, for that. Bernard, your thoughts on this question?
Adrian, I'm trying to think about what's in your mind when you raise your questions. I think we all sitting here are aware of the following. Number one, AI is providing a lot in the future for us to be more efficient. Number two, climate change is here to stay and will get worse. Number three, resource constraint is going to be tighter and tighter if we want to grow, if we want to sustain our living standard. And what I strongly dislike about the fragmentation world is that it counter to all these concerns. When there is fragmentation, the likelihood of hot war is higher, and we now spend more money on building bullets than building dams. So it's going against resource constraint. Number two, all this thing is creating inefficiency. We abandon the first best and don't even embrace the second best. And we are, like Danny just said earlier, we destroyed, someone walked away from the Paris Accord. And the climate change needs international cooperations that would not come for a long while. So we in Singapore here, what can we do? This is the context. And I came to Singapore in 2008. I must say it is one of my most blessed experience in life. Singapore has this government, people, and organizations collaboration. Singapore government can do a lot in this context. Think about we can work with our neighbors, with the Asian countries to say pursue a lot of things like green finance, infrastructure co-development, disease controls, public health movement. We can do a lot of this, led by the government. And all this would be very welcome by the whole region. We can provide subtle leadership to do that and mobilize our companies and our IHLs to contribute along this line. All this are really out of a good heart that we want to find solution, we want to look into the long term to do good. Then for the individuals, I mean, firms and governments comprise of individuals. So this lifelong learning thing is really very important. The importance is not about you do AI. The importance is about seeking together to equip ourselves to be able to not implement solutions, but to find solutions for problems. And a huge amount of problems. And we don't need those big guys here, East and West. We can be self-reliant. We can work together. We can just look into not influencing the whole world, influencing what we can influence, control what we can control. And that is about working together, equip ourselves, seek value, and lead a meaningful life by getting our resources and minds together to build the ecology, to overcome these constraints.
Right. So even in the fragmenting world, there are still pockets of space for us to come together, to collaborate, and to have a sense of community. So even smaller actors.
Right. And this is not small at all, by the way. If you count the population, ASEAN is 700 million, and you add the global south, it's huge. If the elephants want to fight, that's fine, let them fight. As long as we keep our peace, be as neutral as possible, and do the good things, and exhibit a demonstration effect.
So that's great, right? Reclaiming this sense of agency for us to act.
Can I build on what we've said here? Look, I'm worried that everybody is getting tired and fatigued because we have around the world leadership who are convinced correctly that the global climate crisis needs to be taken on. That challenge needs to be taken on. And governments go and tell their businesses and their people, build skills to handle the global climate crisis. If those businesses do not see returns on their investment, if workers, people like you and me, do not see the satisfaction of our moving the needle on the global climate crisis, no matter how many skills we develop to challenge the global climate crisis, we will become tired and fatigued. We will not continue this battle. It is very important that we take into account that the struggle is not just ours. It's not just a matter of our developing the skills, that we can actually, but instead that at the international level, we see enough collaboration that there is a payoff to what we're doing. Otherwise, we will become fatigued and we will give up and our planet will burn up.
And if I may say this, don't try to start grand. Small things can pile up together. Pieces and pieces of Lego can give you a very beautiful structure. I appreciate, like Ravi Menon, before he stepped down, he talked a lot about green finance, and I think he's doing a wonderful job. In my opinion, Singapore is providing the leadership in green finance that help us to have a greener world. We don't tell the world that we have to cut down CO2 per se. We just say it's a concern, let's do something. And bit by bit, we'll claim our place in history.
So that's a great answer to the question. If we could just change gears a bit and maybe focus on a question that's a lot closer to home. So on my tablet, we've got this question. If you permit me, I'll just read it out. It says, the ultimate purpose of Skills Future is to enhance employability of Singaporeans. But then how is that going to help in the face of competition with foreign workers? So this is clearly a question that's been top of mind among Singaporeans for a long time. It speaks to bread and butter issues. It's really visceral in our faces. So again, let's throw this over to Danny. Your thoughts on this, since you also work in this area?
Yeah, every nation is involved in programs to enhance employment and jobs in their economy. Every single nation is doing that. We are not unique in emphasizing this. The challenge that we have is, are our efforts producing results? Are our efforts producing results in a world where there's a zero-sum possibility, so that the jobs that we get come at the cost of jobs elsewhere? Many of the things that we want to be working on, AI regulation, global climate crisis, we will succeed at those. Our companies will get high ROI. Our workers will get good satisfaction when the entire world moves together. We need to work on these ways, on these efforts, in a way that respects how the entire world has to move forwards. Because if we don't, we're caught in a zero-sum game. And that zero-sum game will ultimately frustrate our own efforts at increasing jobs and enhancing employability. This is not to say that we shouldn't be improving our skills capability. We should. But we need to recognize that the effectiveness and the payoff to our increasing our employability and jobs is if we live in a world where the pie continues to grow, continues to expand, where all of us can be prosperous together. That is indeed Singapore's approach to development in the region. My job at the Kuan School is to advance Singapore's position by bringing along everyone else in the region. That's the approach that we need to take in terms of enhancing employability and increasing jobs.
I would pick up on Danny's point about do not adopt the zero-sum game mindset, but the positive-sum mindset. For the skill future and all the training that someone got is actually is going to produce economic spillover. I was very fortunate to learn from really great people when I was involved in the Economic Strategy Committee. Singapore practiced a positive-sum perspective. So when we were talking about less foreign workers and so on, but they invest to ask, to help our companies to be innovative and start to think about skill future. That was in 2010. More than that, they talk about let Singaporean companies to be innovative and be productive and go abroad and make foreign outfits more profitable. And that will benefit Singapore. They were actually at the end giving Singaporeans more jobs. This is about merging the thinking of GDP and GNP together. It's not just the GDP, but it's the GNP. So once you switch your mindset, as Danny hinted, abandon the negative sum, abandon the zero sum, think about the positive sum, then your horizon is very different. So I am very happy to hear what we heard today. And in my mind, it's about if what the minister's picture, if the picture the minister, the senior minister materialize, what will be the benefit, not just for Singaporeans here, but for many, many companies and many other places. And he said, use AI, find AI, keep relevant, and produce capabilities. And those AIs are not going to be, and those capabilities and solutions are not going to be just in Singapore. It's in many places. And that's the way we want to think about it. Our joy should be not from what I have, but what I have plus what are the positive influences that we are able to bring. To me, when I first heard the Skill Future in 2015, what I'm thinking of is not about learning some trades, but it's about changing your perspective, your outlook in life, strengthening your inner self so that you can be a happier human being, so that you can be a more fruitful human being.
I'm glad you pointed it out, because these days when we think about lifelong learning and skills future, we tend to gravitate to what particular skills can we enroll for, and yet we forget that it was always crafted as a movement, a mindset change.
And I have to intervene here, because we in education is not about the technology, it's not about engineering, but it's about changing the person's mindset.
A critical component in what we're saying, although we haven't put voice to it, is the global supply chain. How we figure out how we in Singapore, small nation, 720 square kilometers, 4.5 million people, how do we compete with a world that's populated by 9 billion people with advantages in many different directions? The way we do that is by leveraging other people's strengths. We do not want to be in a position where we are set across a battlefield from them in direct competition. We want to build on other people's strengths, other nations' strengths. We want to plug into the global supply chain. So my suggestion is, even as we think how we advance employability, create more jobs in Singapore, it is vitally important that we figure out how we fit in the global supply chain. In decades past, it was the electronics industry. We got Motorola, HP to invest here, and that was a very valuable way of lifting Singapore's skills, improving housing, improving the well-being of Singaporeans. We plugged into the fuel hydrocarbon supply chain. Very bizarrely and surprisingly, when I tell my Western colleagues, Singapore is one of the world's largest exporters of refined hydrocarbon products. They say, where do you get the hydrocarbons from? Where are you digging this stuff out of? But we plugged into the global supply chain and became hugely successful at that. We need to figure out where we plug into the global supply chain in AI, in chips making, and I think we're beginning to see the start of that.
Let me give you a concrete example.
Yeah.
Okay. Our friends in computer science are researching very hard on how to share data but protect data privacy. Imagine that they succeed. Then they import the network capability, the data capabilities, and with the skill futures, many of us are able to just get connected with a lot of data. Just imagine that we are able to start from the research to find the capability to connect all the medical data in the whole Asian region. What wonder that would be for our development in pharmaceutical products, in healthcare, in preventive care, and a whole bunch of things. And among us are some very deep scientists. They know what I'm talking about. All this are doable, reachable, and it is a collaboration among our researchers, among private companies, and also governments in other neighborhood countries. And when you link all this up together, wow, maybe we can live more than just 100 years, maybe 150, meaningfully.
That prospect, frankly, is terrifying. But, all right, so I thought that we would take one final question, because my boss for the day is gesturing to me that we're coming to the end. It's an education-related question, and I think it's appropriate since, after all, we're doing this on campus. And the question is, broadly speaking, is our education system changing fast enough to enable us to tackle all of these issues we've been discussing? Now, I know that President Tan, Dr. Janil, they spoke about many of these things that we ought to be doing. But perhaps I could put a spin on this, because in the face of threats and in order to seize opportunities, we think in additive terms. What new, funky, novel thing can we do? But equally, we should ask ourselves, what not fit for purpose thing are we doing now that we should stop? So perhaps we could focus on this latter part, right? In as much as we introduce new programs, new schemes, new skills frameworks, and so forth, in your minds, are there things we are now currently doing in our universities and in our schools that perhaps were fit for purpose for a previous world, but clearly are doing us no favors right now? Bernard, perhaps?
I mean, we discussed this a little bit earlier before we walk into this room. I liken our current world with the warring states in China. In that era, there would be 1.46 hot war every year, and many, many people die. But out of that, we find something. There are really great scholars. Confucius was born in that time. That really gave us great education that's still useful nowadays. So I'm not thinking about the funky things. I'm not thinking about this. All I'm thinking is that our university should work also on developing our understanding of humanities and developing values. And I find out that what I learned from the philosophers in those days, I'm talking about 2,000 plus years ago, apply perfectly well today. The world is chaotic. So I learned of the following. Number one, 处变不惊. Don't get nervous when you see changes. Number two, 装强自敬. So you have to have your self-respect and you develop your internal strength. The last one is 自强不息. You have to continue to strengthen yourself, which is lifelong learning. In your mind, in your body, in the way you want to be able to be a functioning, positive contributor to our society. And I think Stephanie's work is very scary to me. Singapore is too competitive. NUS, when I was the dean, I dislike people talk about grades. I don't like bailing curve and all this thing. Susanna knows this, okay? And this will breed the zero-sum mindset. We need to work continuously, and we have started this since Henry Kidd's time, to really change the culture in our university, inculcate value, inculcate understanding of humanity, and combine that with theoretical literacy and technological capability engineering. I want, I hope, I see NUS can become the Shaolin Temple of academics.
So thanks for reminding us of all this, right? Because I think that it's not just that NUS is unique in this. We are by no means unique in this, but the modern university has evolved in a very technocratic way. It's come to resemble a technocracy. And even if we mean technocracy in a good way, right, imbuing our graduates with hard skills to be able to get jobs and stay relevant, I think thanks for reminding us that there's an aspect of the university which is to do with formation, shaping minds, and cultivation. And I think that's
And this was the origin of the purpose of university.
Perhaps the last word over to Danny.
Okay, thanks. I worry that as a group, not just Singaporeans, but Asians generally, are way too critical of ourselves. You know, for 30 years, I lived and worked in the West, and every year, the institutions I was in would look at the crop of Singaporean and Asian students and understand that these were going to be our best performers. But from within Singapore, we're constantly asking, have we emphasized too much the wrong skills? Have we made people too competitive? Everybody else in the world gets only 75% on their exams. We get 98, and we get scolded for missing the last 2 points. We are way too critical. If there were a way to move forward, continuing the discipline that we do have here, which unlike Bernard, I'm a big fan of discipline. Work hard, pay attention to your teachers, put your mind to the right things. I'm a big fan of all of that. But I would add to that, perhaps, the idea that we need to be ever more aware that we are a small island here. It's 4.5 million people, 5 million people in a world of 9 billion. This is a nation that trades 4 times its GDP with the rest of the world. So much of the rest of the world views what happens in Singapore with awe and admiration. If I were to add one thing to our education is we need to be even more internationalist. We need to understand what the concerns of the rest of the world are, and we meet those concerns. We apply the same discipline and dogged-minded approach to how Singapore has always attacked exercises and problem sets to solving problems for the world, that we ourselves in Singapore would become even more prosperous and secure. Have that internationalist mindset would be my parting word.
So indeed, if we flatter ourselves as a global city, then it helps to have a global orientation. And of course, Danny, you and I both know that, of course, in Singapore, self-loathing is part of our cultural DNA. It sits up there with Kiasuism, right? So thank you both for a wonderful conversation. Thanks to those who submitted very interesting questions, gave us some meat to get our teeth into. So would you please join me in thanking Danny and Bernard?